Hello.
Questions?
I know it's a small sample size, but, and a lot of it has to do with who you play, but, you know, being winless at home in the conference play and having a couple of your road wins, I mean, is it because simply of those who you played, or what do you, I mean, how do you get them ready for the road games?
Yeah, it's a good question. Quite frankly, the games last week, I think our opponents were very, very good. The Florida State game, we just did not finish well, and that was true also of the Virginia Tech game at home here. So in those games, it's very different than the way we finished the game at Carolina and Georgia Tech. But if we knew exactly why our players were really cool, calm, and collected at Tech and at Carolina, then we would try to repeat that over and over again and try to win those close games. But I've said this before, players and teams don't play the same way every night. They don't shoot the ball the same way every night. They don't rebound the same every night. And when you're pretty inconsistent in certain areas, they show up more at the end of games when the game is on the line. And probably the best example I can give you, if you ever played golf, and if you're a respectable golfer, you might par a few holes, you might even play good on the front nine, but over a period of time, your weaknesses end up showing up, and you don't finish as strong as you would like. And that's pretty much the way we are right now. We can play well for certain segments of the game, and on certain nights we can play well for the whole game. But we are still very inconsistent, partly because of our inexperience. Guys who had to adapt to new roles, and those roles are very challenging, more responsibilities. So if you look at Manu and Davon, who were both freshmen, against Georgia Tech, Manu had 16. Against Syracuse, Davon had 16. If I could get them both scoring 16 in the same game, we'd have ourselves a heck of a combination.
Yeah, along those lines, I mean, it seems like the defense has done well, but you don't really know who's going to score on a given night. I mean, Davon just stepped up. Gary's had been averaging double figures, now is not. Ryan's been sort of consistent, but I mean, is that one of the big issues? Is you don't know who to
Well,
go
the
to?
offensive end for sure it is, but it's also at the defensive end the rebounding. The same problem we had against Duke, we had against Syracuse. They missed shots, but got the offensive rebound and scored. So, and some of rebounding, quite frankly, is your awareness that you're thinking about rebounding, you're thinking about blocking out, and that you go after the ball with two hands. We just finished watching video, and there was 5 or 6 occasions we had the best chance of getting the ball, but the guy went with one hand. And because he went with one hand, he lost it, or someone else challenged it and knocked it out of that one hand.
Just in the last game, 5 or 6?
Yeah, yeah. And they ended up coming up with like a loose ball. Tyler Ennis got one, and Jeremy Grant got another. So the skills of the games, rebounding is a skill. And offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding are both rebounding skills, but they're different. Offensive rebounding is avoiding being blocked out. We're pretty good at that. Defensive rebounding is about blocking out and holding your position. We're not as good at that, even though we spend a lot of time working on it.
Speaking of rebounding, obviously James Kelly, a big man. Is he going to be okay for the next game? Do you know yet?
No, he will not be ready by Wednesday. No, we don't know if he'll be ready by Saturday. He went for x-rays today.
Yeah, so a little depth. I mean, that's a big deal, I guess, right?
Yeah, it is.
And can you talk about how that impacts sort of your rotation and what you want to do?
Yeah, it adds more responsibility to Eric Swope's role and Rafael Akabajuri's role. Each of those guys has played. Eric has been playing actually more at the 3 recently because of our lack of rebounding. We try to get a little bigger with him at the 3. And that'll move him into that 4 spot.
Are you worried about a break? I mean, something that could be longer term, or is it? It doesn't look
Well,
like it's
I don't
just
think
a
about
sprain.
those things until the trainer tells me.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever he tells me, hey, he'll be back in a day, he'll be back in 2 weeks, he'll be back in 6 weeks, whatever he tells me, that's what we'll deal with.
But it was still obviously still sore and swollen or whatever.
Yeah,
Is it the ankle like you said the other day?
yeah. He came down, he took a shot and landed on someone's foot.
What do you expect from Maryland up there?
Well, I think Maryland has gone through some of the same
They're kind of
issues that we have. They're a little bit inconsistent. Some nights they play very, very well. They can really score the ball. They've got a lot of weapons. But defense and rebounding wise, they've not been as strong as they'd like to be. Very similar to us. We would like to be a much better rebounding team. And guys have to really work at that.
Is there anyone in particular on their team that concerns you more than?
Well, a guy like Des Wells
Des.
is capable of having a huge game, but they've got very good three-point shooters in Jake Lehman and Smolchus, both about 6'8", 6'9", but they shoot threes. And because of their size and shooting ability, that's concerns us because that means we've got to stretch our defense out like we did against Duke. And that opens it up for offensive rebound opportunities for their bigger guys like Clear and Mitchell.
Coach, the team has kind of struggled scoring this year on offense, as you acknowledge, but it seems like they've had a little bit more of a hard time in conference games. What do you attribute that to?
Well, the team we're playing is really good.
Would you say that for really the whole conference as in its
Yeah,
entirety?
the league, one of the things about the ACC is these coaches are very experienced. And so when you're trying to plan how you're going to win, in just about everybody's case, it starts with defense. And so they're going to scout us. We've played plenty of games now. They're going to look at our roster, look at our statistics, and say, like Duke did, hey, we got to stop Ryan Brown. We've got to corral Manu so he doesn't do what he did at Carolina. And those teams that have a good strategy and it works, makes it harder on us to score the ball.
Do you feel like you can control the game a little bit better if you keep it more of a low-scoring game?
Well, we have to keep it low scoring because we don't have the firepower. If you look at, and I'll use Eric Swope, Rafael Akabajuri, and Tanya Jakiri. If you combined all of their career points, now they've played Eric Swope 4 years, Rafael 4 years, and Tanya 2 years. So 10 years of basketball, they don't have as many points as Ryan Brown does, total. So when your front court guys don't score a ton of points, you got to figure out different ways to manufacture points. And the way we've done it is reduce the number of possessions in the game. So if we're not going to score a ton, if we're going to average in the 50s or low 60s, we got to keep the opponent into the 50s.
Were you surprised that they were giving Tanya that little 10-foot jumper? I mean, they weren't even trying to defend it, and Tanya can hit that consistently, right?
Well, that would be nice.
They didn't think so. I guess that's the problem.
No. What you saw in Syracuse and what we've learned about Syracuse, and I've said this before the game, they look at how you're trying to score against them, and they try to then take that away, making you go to a secondary option. So one of the things we tried to do up there that we tried to do again here is throw over the defense and throw lobs. They stopped every one of those this time. I don't think we got one lob pass through. So the next thing was we went to a high-low game with Tanya in the high post. We scored on that several times because they did go up to guard him and he found the open man. So then the next thing was they dropped off of him and said, okay, he can pass it, let's see if he can shoot it. And he made one, but then he missed several. So they're constantly adjusting their defense based on how you're attacking it, and you have to adjust your offense. And it's hard as a coach to adjust it every time because then you're constantly playing catch-up. It's up to the players to read that defense and figure out what is open and take advantage of the opening. So one of the things we did is we drove and kicked it to the baseline man, and he hit a jump shot, Donovan Kirk, to start. Next time that was not available. So the guy drove, and okay, who am I throwing it to now? I can't tell him. He's in midair. I can't yell to him, okay, now throw it to your right. It doesn't work that way. And one of the things we did was we threw it up to Tanya. He threw it right back to Ryan Brown. The adjustment we made, we started changing our personnel so they couldn't find Ryan Brown at the wing all the time. Because normally Ryan plays at the wing. So at a timeout I said, Ryan, you go to the point. So they didn't adjust to that until after Ryan had hit one or two. Okay, then they adjusted to that and said, okay, we're not leaving Ryan Brown, leave one of the wingmen open. I left Davon Reed open. He made a couple, made some very good baskets. All right, and then they adjusted that and they said, okay, just leave Tanya open and let him shoot. So it's a chess match. And they have more chess pieces than we do. You know, they somehow have like 2 queens and 4 castles.
Someone asked me at the game, if last year's Miami team was playing this year's Syracuse team, who would win? I thought it was an interesting question. I mean, how good is the Syracuse team? Because, you know how good your team was last year.
Yeah, we would have won.
You would have.
Yeah.
You got 3 points.
I don't have to prove that statement. But one of the things about last year is we had 5 guys averaging double figures. You couldn't leave any one of them open. Right? Now you have a guy gets 16, the next game he gets 2. Okay, we'll leave him open now for a while. So there's the difference. If you didn't guard Shane Larkin, he could make the 3. If you didn't guard Durant Scott, he could make the 3. Trey McKinney-Jones, Kenny Kaji, Ryan Brown off the bench, he could come in and make 3s. When you have a more potent offensive team, you have more weapons, more ways to attack. The fewer weapons you have, the easier it is for the defense to focus on that particular guy or that particular offense and say, when they run this offense, we're taking this away. And that's what Duke did.
Coach Boeheim was saying too that Duke, because they're good at man-to-man, that he said since your team doesn't really have a point guard, other than Manu, that if you can play a pressure defense like that, which he said they couldn't because they're zone, but any team that can, that's what they're going to do against you, to force him into mistakes.
And what he said is very true. Why didn't he pressure us?
He said he couldn't.
They're not a pressure team.
Yeah.
So you can't just change your style because you see a weakness in the opponent. You got to play your style the best way you know how. And then maybe in desperation you could change and hope that you guys can press well that one game. But if you don't practice it daily, it's hard all of a sudden just to turn around and say, okay, we're going to press Miami because they have freshman point guards. Right?
He said it was like, his analogy was about if you go to a great restaurant and they make this really gourmet dish you love, and then you go home and you say to your wife, I want you to make that dish for me, she can't.
Yeah.
She doesn't know how to cook. So
No,
that's what...
he wasn't talking about my wife.
No,
My
of course
wife's
not.
a great cook. Get that, put that on TV.
Jim, you obviously have a pure 4 this year in Donovan, a pure 5 in Tonier. How difficult, though, is it in recruiting to find bigs, centers in particular, who are offensively skilled? There are obviously not a lot of them. How challenging is that, and does that make you want to perhaps think of playing more small, not this year, but, next year when you have Angel, et cetera, and McClellan, et cetera?
In one word, impossible.
To find those kind of bigs.
To find a big with skills who knows how to play, and those guys are so highly recruited. And you look at even some of the best basketball programs in the country, and they don't have one. No, there are not a lot of those guys out there. In fact, there are not a lot of guys like that in the NBA anymore.
Yeah,
There are really no centers. There's not a lot of Dwight Howards. Guys who play in the low post, know their low post players, know their post men, 5 men, and have back to the basket skills, size, strength, jumping ability, defensive abilities in the post. There are just not very many of them.
You have Kirk this year, but looking at your roster with all the quality guards you'll have next year, does that make you think maybe we're a team that in the future will play a lot of small ball?
The answer to that is definitely yes.
Speaking of Donovan, I know he hit the one shot there in the corner that you mentioned a couple of times here, but what else was they doing? Were they concentrating that much on him? Because he just didn't seem to touch the ball.
Well, as I mentioned, Syracuse does certain things, and a couple of things they do limit what Don is able to do. One of the things they do is they trap the corner and the baseline, where he gets a lot of his baskets. So we have to avoid throwing it to him there, unless he's just going to catch it and shoot it. Because the next thing that's going to happen, which happened up at Syracuse twice, no, actually it happened 4 times. First time it happened, he called a timeout. Second time it happened, he tried to throw it out of the double team, threw it away. Third time it happened, he called a timeout. Fourth time it happened, he threw it away. So we decided that's probably not a good option. We only have 5 timeouts. I don't like calling them. I don't like the players calling them.
Jim, I know we've talked about Tanya, just the foul issue that he's dealing with. I mean, are you guys still working with him, talking to him? How is that progression coming along?
Not as fast as I would like. I think you have to have a certain mindset when it comes to knowing this is a time that I could commit a foul and it's not that bad. You also have to have the mindset of, hey, I can't afford to pick up a foul now. I've got to, at all costs, avoid fouling. He hasn't learned that yet. And especially like early in the game, he picked up a foul very, very early. And I'm saying to what ends up happening, then the next foul, you're on the bench, and maybe for the rest of the half. And so that first foul is very significant, because it all of a sudden puts you in jeopardy. Second is he plays hard defensively, and he's our best defensive rebounder by a substantial margin. So he's constantly in battles for position. And his inexperience, he's only played 4 years. He's not like a kid who started playing when he was 8 or 10 years old and learned the nuances of the game. He tends to use his hands, push for position, instead of moving his feet and using his body. And so he likes to block shots, and he's pretty good at that, but he gets himself up in the air and out of position a lot, and that causes foul problems. As a whole, we're one of the best teams in the country in not fouling. In fact, I think we're number 1 in the ACC and one of the top 10 in the country. But Tanya's one of those guys that he's learning. I'd like to say he's improving, but this is the first year he's played full-time where he's out there 25, 30 minutes. Last year, if he picked up a couple of fouls, he just came out of the game. He didn't worry about it. Now all of a sudden he's realizing, man, I need to be out there, and I'm in foul trouble. I got to get better at not fouling. But he's learning. He's got a lot to learn.
Coach, the last 2 games were against some of the best opponents in the country, but the losses, they do start to sting after a while. What do you tell your guys after 2 games like that?
Well, I think the losses always sting. It doesn't matter if it's back in November or right now, and it doesn't matter if the opponent is a top 10 team, or it sometimes hurts a lot more when they're not as highly regarded and you feel like you should have won the game. Basically, the message to these guys is very, very consistent, which is keep improving, learn from every situation, get better at what we're trying to do, so that they know early in the year we were not very good defensively. And we were pretty decent rebounding at that time. We've gotten a whole lot better at guarding the first shot. Now the focus is on, hey, we got to finish that defensive possession with a rebound. And on offense, just try to develop a little more consistency, be a little calmer, not rush so much. Going into the game, I think we were 9-2 if we scored 1 point per possession. I think now we're 9-3. We actually scored over 1 point per possession against Syracuse. And that should have been good enough to win the game offensively. It was our defensive rebounding again that killed us.
Do you think that consistent message is gonna help them with their maturation process, or is it just gonna be one day it clicks for these guys?
Oh, no, it's like developing any new habit. You go through ups and downs. You don't all of a sudden become great at something. No, there's a lot of inconsistencies in improving. It's not, a super highway where you just put the pedal to the metal and zoom, you keep improving all the way along. No, it's like a roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs. We got better, we got worse. Took 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps back, 1 step forward. It's that way all the time in improving. And the reason is you have so many things you have to improve in. While you're improving in defense, the rebounding suffered. You only have so many hours in the day, right? So while we're working on the defense, the offense is not getting better. So we're working on everything, but you can only spend, at this time of year, our practices are reduced to about an hour and a half. We spend more time watching video, showing them the mistakes, trying to teach them, what is right. And we talked about why Syracuse is so good at the end of games. And it's their calmness. Tyler Innes, he looks like he's in slow motion. He doesn't look like anything bothers him. They fall behind, you don't see any panic in their face, did you? Boeheim called a timeout and said, hey guys, we need to do this and this, and they just went out and did it. I called the timeout, hey listen, this is a perfect time, we're going to run the lob play, and then we threw the ball away. And it wasn't the passer's fault. We were supposed to set a back screen and send a cutter to occupy the defense, and the screener turned and looked to see if we caught the lob. Those are mental mistakes.
You also got a 3-pointer off a long play too.
Yeah, I called for that.
I don't know. I've been asked to poll coaches or whatever on Super Bowl picks. This is kind of offline. Do you have a Super Bowl pick?
Who's playing? If I had to pick a team, where is the game being played? In New York?
Yeah.
And what's the weather going to be?
30 degrees.
San Francisco. Denver can't play in the cold. 8. Peyton Manning is not a young stud anymore. And his success in cold weather is limited. So I think that favors San Francisco.
They're playing Seattle.
I meant Seattle.
You've been preoccupied.
I meant Seattle.
Do you have a score? Daughter number.
Yeah, it'll be a low scoring game. Let's say 17-10. I meant Seattle too.
I hate to keep doing this.
Pete Carroll's son is my next door neighbor, so
They also won an MVP. Russell Wilson.
Who's he play for?
Come on. He's even from the ACC.
Okay, Russell Wilson.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.